Hi, BookTube. Okay, so I was trying to be creative with my thumbnail instead of doing something, like just holding a book like this. So, and since this is a fantasy related video, I thought I would show myself reading a fantasy book and giving you trying to show that I'm smiling. But, I thought I would do a tag, and this is the Get to Know Your Fantasy Reader tag. It's sort of original tag. It was created by the Book Pusher. But it was actually what she did was she took another tag, another tag, and turned it into a fantasy related tag. They took it was a romance tag and then turned it so it could be applied to fantasy readers, and turned it into her own thing. So the first question is, what is your fantasy origin story? How you came to read your first fantasy novel? So, when I was a kid, there were, I read books, I was one of the kids who read the Goosebumps books, although I think I watched the show more than I read the books. But I had quite a few of them. I read, Animorphs, and I read, the Magic Attic Club series, which is kind of like, you know how they have the American Girl dolls, and they have a series of books that goes with each doll? Well, they had the Magic Attic series, which not the company, but there was another company that created these dolls that had I think there were four or five girls, and they had dolls and books that go with them, and each of the dolls would go to, I don't know if it was like a grandmother of one of the girls in the group, or if it was like an older person, an older neighbor that they knew, and they would go to her house and hang out with her. But they would always go up to this attic, where there were all these costumes and dress-up clothes, crowns and dresses and masks and stuff like that, and they would put them on. And then I don't remember if there was a door, or when they put on the mask, it would transport the costume piece or whatever, it would transport them. But they would go into the time period that costume represented. And like I said, there were dolls that goes with each one of them, and it was always a really fun series to watch, that I really liked. And then, but then I also read a lot of contemporaries like Nancy Drew and the Babysitters Club and stuff, and but the one thing that when I really got into fantasy was in middle school age, where a lot of people readers that grew up in the 90s, I discovered the Harry Potter books. We were hanging out with friends at Borders when Borders still existed, and the girl that was her mom was helping her get a box for her Harry Potter books or something, and she probably got rid of them because now she does not seem like the type that really, I think it was just probably so it was popular and interesting at the time, and now I don't see her being the type that would read those books, but then you never know with people. And my mom had asked if I was interested, and I looked at the first book, and I was like, oh yeah, I am interested. Or, of course, let's face it, in the end, I probably didn't care. It was just an interesting book that she would buy for me. And I think the first 3 books were already out when I got into it, and then because I remember going to the midnight release of Goblet of Fire, and at the time we didn't really participate, and if there were any activities going on at the store, I didn't really participate in them. I think my dad I don't know if it was just because I was too shy back then, or if my dad just wanted to get out of there. But all we did was pick up the book and stand in line and wait to pay for it, which was a really long line. So really, that was kind of what sealed the deal for me and got me into fantasy, was the Harry Potter books. Probably most people, especially if you grew up when the Harry Potter books came out. So question number 2, if you could be a hero or heroine in a fantasy novel, who would be the author, and what's one trope you'd insist to be in the story? And I have 2. that I decided on. It took me a while because as you guys know, I think about my answers to these questions ahead of time, and it was hard. It's surprisingly hard to come up with a good answer because a lot, a lot of the fantasy authors I like, I don't know if I want to be part of their world and the worlds that they create. And I've also kind of moved on from those authors anyway. But I was able to pick, and I also don't know if I would survive them. And I also want to try to I wanted to make my answer a female author and not just, because now I'm even more conscious than ever about that kind of stuff. But I mean, again, it doesn't mean, I'm not shying away from male authors. It's just, you want to put me, a female reader, I want to put it out there that women write great epic fantasy too. So, actually, I just thought of the third one that might not be too terrible. Well, depending on my situation, though. But I would say the three I like best that I wouldn't mind is, first of all, Erin Morgenstern. So far, none of her, at least in the Night Circuit, didn't seem too terribly dangerous, and I love to be part of the worlds, and she creates these great atmospheres and worlds and stuff. And of course, I love to have magical powers, or be someone or have a magical gift or something. And I wouldn't want to be, and I would also kind of want to make sure I have a sibling or someone in my story, like the trope of the mentor trope would be cool too. Like if she decided to write me with being an orphan or whatever. What if I wouldn't mind having a mentor that was like a parental figure, like a guardian, like a parent, the closest thing to a parent. If she decided to write me without parents, at least without biological parents anyway. And like I said, I also thought about Naomi Novik. I think her worlds are really cool. Her magic system is really cool. And again, when I would one of the people that has special powers would be really cool. Would be great. Based on the same tropes I said for the first author. And I also like the idea of being in a historical world where not just the medieval or Renaissance period, but a historical world that one doesn't, the idea of that having magic in a world in a time period where you wouldn't think there would be magic. In her Terror series, it's during the Napoleonic era, and she has dragons. There's dragons. And it begs the question, what if we had dragons at that time, in Europe? And then the other person I thought about that I like so far is, although that this could be potentially dangerous, the same with Naomi Novik, is Robin Hobb. Her Realm of the Elderling series. Although I don't know, because it's a medieval period and women don't have a lot but then again, I think there are times when I would love to go into that story and help Fitz out and tell people, like Molly, for instance, that she's being unfair to Fitz and awfully judgmental. And I've seen that one, and that there's how Molly treats Fitz, like I said when I was talking about Wheel of Time series, reminds me of how Egwene treats Rand, and how she's he'll say something that I have a magical destiny, or a bad guy's after me, or oh, all these girls are flirting with me. She's like, okay, if you're joking, this is no time for jokes. Tell me, if you don't want to tell me the truth, fine. But she doesn't believe him. That's how Molly at first treated Fitz when he finally did tell her the truth. Her first reaction. And it really annoyed me. Of course, that's not what this is about. This question is... So really, I don't know. It was one I thought about just now, but then again, thinking about it now, right at this moment, I'm starting to change my mind, so I don't know. Although her magic system is really cool, though. I like the whole idea of the skill, and then the other type of magic where you communicate with animals that would be specifically. That's I just, I'm just gonna stick with Naomi Novik or Aaron Morgenstern. Okay, so question number 3: what is fantasy you've read this year that you want more people to read? I'm trying to think. I think I would like people to get more. I loved Elantris. That's not a favorite Brandon Sanderson one for some reason, and I personally don't get it. I mean, I guess it's not as good as Mistborn or the Stormlight Archives, but I thought Elantris was really great. I enjoyed reading that. I enjoyed reading that one, and I also really liked. I had a good time with the first book of the Wheel of Time, The Eye of the Dragon. I think I would love for more people to read that series. Although I'm sure there are a lot of people that love that series. I just am not friends with them yet. But I think I would love for that to get more popular, more mainstream, and I think it will be. It will get more mainstream because of the TV show coming out. And the same with The Witcher too. Like, I feel like The Witcher and The Wheel of Time, it's because they've only become, like, they had kind of a cult following, and it seems like, and maybe there are a lot more fans than I think, but I feel like stuff that has a cult following, it's one of these things where it seems popular and really big amongst the cult of fans for that thing. But then I feel like overall, the big picture, I feel like it doesn't get popular until it becomes like a TV series or something, or like a major motion picture like Lord of the Rings. I mean, I think I could be wrong here, but I think Lord of the Rings probably got universally popular because of the movies, because of Peter Jackson's movies. And now people still talk about it. And the same with Song of Ice and Fire series. I feel like it wasn't until the Game of Thrones TV series that it got popular. And I mean, again, I don't have the statistics or anything like that. I don't really have proof or evidence to this that proves this, but that's just the vibe I'm getting. That I feel like the series, especially in the fantasy, which does kind of go along with that kind of goes with one of the questions on here. I think it does. What was the question? What is the fantasy you read? Oh, okay. So, like I said, Wheel of Time's The Eye of the World, since I only read that one, and then The Witcher is another one that I hope becomes more popular. I think it will be now that the Netflix is out for that one. And then I would also like to hear more about the Temeraire series. When people think of Naomi Novik, they think of Uprooted or Spinning Silver, but I would love to see more people talk about get into the Temeraire series too, because that's a really fun series. And who doesn't? And my reason for loving that series kind of applies to an answer to one of these questions. Which good is the next question. What is your favorite subgenre? What subgenres have you not read much from? And the first part of the question was your favorite fantasy subgenre, and that is, I like historical fantasy. Oh, and I also like, actually, before I say this, I'm going to say this for the next part of the question. So, let me, historical fantasy, I think it's really cool, especially the idea of, like, I know you have a lot of, like, medieval Renaissance stories, inspired stories that have, like, it makes sense that there's magic in them, like, because of things like the Arthurian legend and stuff. And then you have, like, stories that are straight up high fantasy that are inspired by, they're not historical, but they have a very medieval Renaissance feel to them. So you expect magic in those kind of stories, but I'm talking about the historical ones where you wouldn't see magic. Like, you don't expect there to be magic. That's what I like about Dr. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which I need to keep going with. Naomi Novak series, Temeraire series. I think of another example where there's I can't think of another example. There's a lot of but yeah, historical fantasy is like, you don't expect magic to be there, but then it's kind of cool, the idea of thinking about, or like magic in the Old West. Like, I do believe that there's in Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn era too, is that during kind of a Western inspired. Now, I don't think it's historical, but it's Western inspired setting time period. And I think what he's doing with the Mistborn stuff is that he's going to different, like, the worlds he's create are kind of inspired by different time periods, different eras. Okay, so what in the part 2 of this question is, what subgenre have you not read much from? Well, the two I was thinking of is political fantasy. I like the idea of politics in a fantasy world. I think I don't like our contemporary politics. I hear about that enough as it is, especially the kind of what's going on right now with, who our president is, and people have such strong feelings about our current president. And so I don't want to read about that because I hear about that all the time. But it's kind of really cool to get the politics of a fantasy world and like learning about the government of a fantasy world and taking and using things like persecution and segregation of like magical creatures as kind of like the representative of the real life stuff, that the real life sexism and persecutions and segregation, all that stuff. I think it's like making like a metaphor. I mean, I think that's probably why I like Joss Whedon's writing, is because he takes real world issues but turns them into a metaphor, like uses fantasy. And then I don't read a lot. I've been wanting to get into the horror fantasy genre. Like, so far I've only read Stephen King and his books. You can argue, as Daniel Green put it, that it is horror. It's his main label is horror. And he doesn't even just write horror anyway. He also, some of his other books aren't just horror. They have a horror, and aren't just horror, or they have only a little bit of a horror aspect to it. Or the way he writes sometimes is very much contemporary writing, like as if it were a contemporary story. But he write a lot of his stories. There's always something supernatural going on, and I know, in fact, a lot of people don't always like that about his works. Like, there's all of a sudden a supernatural twist, Now, I personally love it. I love when there's a supernatural twist, and he does it all the time. So it's like Pennywise is, that's kind of blurring the line between sci-fi and fantasy, because Pennywise is a shapeshifter, which you usually see in fantasy, but what he really is, his true form is this alien spider hybrid creature from another planet. So there's a sci-fi twist to it, but it still has a super paranormal element. And then there's in 2263, it involves time travel. That's more sci-fi to me, but I think one that is directly fantasy. I think there's one, he does have a novella where there's a werewolf, a guy that turns into a werewolf, and there's also he has his vampire novel Salem's Lot, which is based on the idea of what if Dracula came to the suburbs. And there's also I'm just trying to think of another one. My back has been driving me crazy, it's all itchy and stuff. And then The Shining involves a ghost in a haunted hotel. So a lot of paranormal fantasy, horror type stuff. And then there was something else. Oh, and like The Stand. The Stand is post-apocalyptic. So more, if anything, there's a lot of science fiction in there too. The science fiction horror. I had another example. I can't remember what it was. Watch it will come to me in a few minutes, or like by the time I stop filming this. Okay. Back to question 4. I was also gonna say that I kind of stopped reading paranormal, which is because it kind of got old after a while. So I haven't read a lot of that in a long time. Who is one of your auto-buy fantasy authors? And this one is kind of hard. Because, there's some of them that I think they are auto-buy authors, but then I realize, oh, wait, no, they're not, because I'm not interested in everything they write, like Stephen King. I'm not interested in, like, his Mr. Mercedes, of course. That's not really fantasy anyway, or even science fiction for that matter, I don't think. Well, I would probably have to say Brandon Sanderson. Naomi Novak, although I have not bought Uprooted. I had Uprooted, but I borrowed it from the library because I wasn't sure how I felt about it. But then it is on my Amazon wishlist though. But I haven't actually bought it, and it hasn't been given to me as a gift or anything. Who else? I don't know, because I don't know. I keep trying. I have such dry skin. My skin is so sensitive, so now it's all itchy and stuff in certain parts of my body. And I'm trying not to scratch it, but it's really hard. Okay, so that was question number 5. Now question number 6. How do you typically find fantasy recommendations? Goodreads, YouTube, podcast, Instagram. YouTube and Goodreads. Mostly YouTube, or BookTube to be more specific. And then Goodreads. But mostly BookTube. Question number 7. What is an upcoming fantasy release you're excited about? I think which one I'm excited about. Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend, I guess, is a one. I already bought the Melissa Albert's The Night Country. I already bought that one. I can't even really say. I can't really say with Brandon Sanderson's newest book because I'm still behind on him, and I'm behind on. That actually is part of the problem, is I'm behind on a lot of fantasy authors. I'm still trying to catch up with Cassandra Clare. I knew that was going to happen. Trying to ignore it and not react, but I'm not doing a very good job. So I don't know. I can't think of any other fantasy. But anyway, so really I don't have any answers for that one. Question number 8. What is one misconception about adult fantasy you would like to lay to rest? That it's not just a silly genre that can't be taken seriously. Because, it deals with fighting with moral dilemmas, the good versus evil. It also is trying to develop into more than just the damsel in distress trope, and it's trying to go beyond that and it helps you to be strong and find out who you are as a person. And I feel like a lot of times people don't, they're like, you're not a serious reader if you read a genre, any genre, like whether it's fantasy, horror, sci-fi, romance. people don't take it seriously. They think it's not worth studying. I mean, I have heard of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer classes where people study and analyze it. And I watch, like, on YouTube and on Facebook, I see people analyzing all the time and talking about it all the time. And it's not it's not stupid stuff. Like, it's not just about who the main character is gonna fall in love with. It's also, like I said, it's about good versus evil, figuring out who you are, and living your life with the weight of the world on your shoulders. It has so much more depth than I think people give it credit for. And also, something that both Sam and the book pusher brought up is that people think it's a boys' club. And obviously, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. And I have a lot of friends that most of my friends are girls. I don't have a lot of guy friends, and they love fantasy. And there are a lot of booktubers, a lot of people on BookTube are girls who love fantasy. So I feel like there are so many judgments about, like, fantasy or just genre fiction in general that I think are so unfair and ridiculous. Okay, so question number 9. If someone had never read a fantasy before and asked you to recommend the first 3 books that come to mind as places to start, what would those recommendations be? And my answer is basically the same as Sam from Thoughts and Tomes' answer, which is, I feel like you can't just recommend something to someone on the fly. I think you have to get to know what type of reader they are. You have to, in whatever other genres or types of books that they've read before, and find fantasy books that kind of have those elements too. Like she talked about, if ask them, are you a romance reader? You do like horror. If you like horror, then you might want to check out Stephen King's fantasy books. If you like romance, and this is just an example I'm throwing out there. I know a lot of people have issues with Twilight, but Twilight, it has a romance, although it's not the best kind of romance, but it still is a romance, and it's an easy read. And again, I'm sure, and I think I would not recommend going into a certain author, go with certain authors, like, don't go with the older fantasy, like, don't start with Lord of the Rings. I mean, like, I feel like it's, like Sam said, it's very hard, because you have to know what kind of, people have such different interests and different taste. Different things that appeal to different people. I mean, that's why you have such a variety of different opinions, and why sometimes a book that I really absolutely love is a book that someone else absolutely hates, because they have different interests than I do. So I feel like you can't just on the fly recommend 3 perfect books. And I did say, I can't think of I can't think of a third potential one. Oh, well, I guess, Harry Potter. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, Harry Potter. It's, despite some of the names, and some of the names of, like, people and spells, I think it's pretty easy to follow, and it's fun, and the magic system is very light and uncomplicated. And it has a lot of the, dramas that a lot of contemporary books have, like, for young readers. So yeah, I'll just go with those 3. Harry Potter, Twilight, and I can't think of the other one. Oh, and I said Stephen King, some of Stephen King's fantasies. Number 10. Who is the most recent fantasy reader content creator you have come across that you'd like to shout out? Okay, it's gonna be hard, because I watch a lot of them, and they're not that recent. I've been watching them for a while. I can't think of people's names. I believe Jennifer Brooks reads a little bit of fantasy, although she's kind of more historical. She reads a lot more historical stuff, but I think she also reads fantasy. It's Jennifer Brooks. I'll post a link to her channel down below. There was one that I'm trying to remember her name. Give me a minute. Let me put this down because I don't need that anymore. This thing is taking too long. Let me find her. I'll know her when I see her. Oh, okay. Okay, so, I apologize for that. I should have planned ahead and got these names ahead of time. But this was one of these things I just decided. So, Tati the tiny book, crap. Oh, tiny booktuber. Tati the tiny booktuber. I really like her. I think she, let's see. I'm trying to pick people that are smaller channels to get people to, because especially on someone that is also a smaller channel. So yeah, I guess I'll just say Jennifer Books and the Tati the Tiny Booktuber. They don't just read fantasy, but they do read fantasy, and so that is my getting to know the fantasy reader tag. If you like this video, be sure to give a thumbs up, click subscribe if you haven't, and consider yourself tagged. And I hope you enjoyed your reading, and I will talk to y'all later. Alright, bye!